What is up, XRP community? Welcome back to another video. This is not supposed to be FUD, but there's a lot of alarming stuff going on in the general crypto markets. I'm going to cover all that stuff. And then at the end, I've talked about this article a lot. It's from 2019, Ripple's connections with the IMF and central banks. I have a video here from the head of the European Central Bank or the International Monetary Fund, one of the two, I'm not sure which one. Christine Lagarde, bottom line, she's a big power player. And what she says here, I've talked about it many times. The writing is on the wall, and I'm going to show you exactly what the writing on the wall is. If you guys want to support, hit the like button. It's free. It takes a second. I make these videos for free. I don't show you BS sponsors and ads to get you wrecked. All I ask is you take a second, press the like button. It's free. Also, we have this alpha chat, okay? 35 members. There were 4 members in here yesterday. It's free. In the future, I'm going to charge money for it. So join while it's free. If you like talking about crypto, you like XRP, you want a chat group to talk about those shared interests, link is in the video description below. Join the Telegram. Okay. Now to start, there's a big hurricane down in Florida. Okay. My Twitter is also in the video description if you care. If not, it's okay. So here's a condo that I go to sometimes. Beautiful view, right? See the pool down here in the bottom right? All right. Now check how Florida's doing right now. This is all a pool right here, covered up. Ocean's supposed to stop here. It's all the way up. So if you're in Florida, make sure you're staying safe. You know, life is crazy like that. You never know how short it might be. So take care of yourselves. Take care of your families. The Biden administration announcing a $1.1 billion weapons package. I hate seeing this stuff, right? Taxes are being used to just start wars and wage battles for the high-level profit players to make money. And it's really despicable stuff. The average citizen doesn't really understand this. But this $1 billion could be used in so many better ways, but instead we're just shipping off weapons. And who do you think made these weapons, guys? What company do you think made these weapons? How do you think their stock's doing? How many conflicts of interest do they have with the government? I hate seeing this stuff. It's BS. Now to piggyback off the Biden administration, smart guy here, Naval, very smart venture capitalist and investor, he says, the panic led to lockdowns. True. Lockdowns led to fiscal stimulus. Stimulus led to inflation. Inflation leads to monetary tightening. Tightening leads to a recession. The panic wasn't free and the bill is coming due. Now ask yourself, who started this panic? Did people just get panicked randomly? Right? The whole world is a stage and we're watching it in real time. Now, depending on your opinions on the CV19, I can't say it on YouTube because they'll literally shadow ban me. This is all caused from that shutdown. And how necessary was the shutdown? How necessary are these masks, right? Science is all about questioning the hypothesis. And nowadays, if you disagree with science, what do they say to you? Just believe in science, bro. Really disgusting stuff, but fear leads to control. And if anything from this situation, we learned that the government can cause fear and they can cause people to just beg for their rights to be taken away. Good tweet from Zero Hedge. Kind of scary stuff, guys, but if you look at the DXY, this is the dollar index, the year-on-year change. Okay, so basically, how well did the dollar index do this year? How strong is the dollar? So you can see in 93, 94, when the dollar had this massive gain, boom, Mexican debt crisis. When the dollar had a massive gain in 97, boom, Russian default. Early 2000s, boom, tech bubble recession, went down. 03 to 05, huge gains. Then we had the housing bubble peak. Boom, went back down. 2008, terrible global financial crisis, right? Of course, they did lots of measures to make the dollar strong again. What happened immediately after that? Boom, insane drops. Okay, early 2010s, the sovereign debt crisis. Boom. China in 2015. Boom. And so now it's just showing what's going to happen, right? We're at a crazy gain the past years ever since that pandemic dip. What's going to happen now, right? Men lie, women lie, numbers don't lie. Deduce what you want from that. The bonds are supposed to be safe, right? Typically, government bonds have been a risk-off asset. In the UK, which has been doing worse than the USA, look at the bond prices, all right? Just 6 months ago, the bonds were up all the way at about 90. Now they're at 25. Absolutely despicable. 75% drop. And it's supposed to be a safe asset. This is not how the economy is supposed to operate. This should alarm you guys. Another great tweet from this guy. The market is on one of the worst cusps for a 3-quarter return since 2008. What happened in 2008? Terrible financial crisis, right? You see these red candlesticks. So the past 2 quarters have been terrible. If you look at this recent quarter, you can't see my cursor, but you see how this line that's highlighted in yellow? This is a wick. What this means is for this quarter, it's the quarterly chart. Each candle represents 3 months. It went all the way up. This line means the price went all the way up here, and it's currently all the way down here. What does that mean? Well, if the price went all the way up here and now it's back down here, that means that the sellers had the power and currently still have the power to push the price all the way down here. This is super bearish. This is not good stuff. And with the quarterly about to close, you're looking at another quarter of just bloodshed, right? 2 massive red candles, and then here we have a massive red wick. Call this a bearish hammer. This is not looking good, guys. Yes, the stock market could randomly rebound, but it's looking like we're going to have a few bad months. And then a follow-up. The Fed is still talking about whether this is a recession or not. Keep in mind, guys, the Federal Reserve redefined what a recession was recently. You can look that up. They literally changed the definition of a recession. And a few months before that, they changed the baskets on the consumer price index, which determines inflation. So like oil, consumer products, energy, all these things have a percent weight, and they combine that to see how bad inflation is. They changed for like gasoline what the weighted inflation amount was, right? And what happened to gasoline went crazy. So they're manipulating these definitions and metrics right in front of you guys. And why are they doing that? Probably because shit's going to hit the fan and they want to keep calm. Panic makes everything worse, right? But keep in mind, in 2008, interest rates were lower. Bond market trading in 2008, GDP fell for 2 quarters. Then the housing market crash began, right? And stocks off to the worst 4th year ever. The Fed destroyed the economy. So I'm not trying to cause FUD, but this is relevant information that you guys should be privy to. And then the last thing before I get into the XRP stuff, home buyers are backing out of deals at a record high rate in these 10 U.S. cities, right? 2 years ago, housing markets in the U.S. were amazing. In the past 2 years, if you owned a house, you've seen your equity soar. Prices can't go up forever. We're seeing that now. And now for a clip from the ECB chief, Christine Lagarde, and where XRP fits into the future of all this. Chief Lagarde says she does not like to see a new period of free banking due to cryptocurrencies. Central bank digital currencies are required to maintain the role of central banks. All right, I'll play this quick clip and then we'll break it down.
Where do we stand?
What you guys really want to see is this article at the end, so don't go anywhere. This stuff's crazy.
Central bankers, we have been operating as a monetary anchor in relation to the commercial banks and the private money. If we are not in that game, if we are not involved in experimenting, in innovating in terms of digital central bank money, we risk losing the role of anchor that we have played for many, many decades. And we have historical examples of period where the central bank monetary anchor was not there, and that precipitated crisis after crisis. That certainly was the case at the time of the free banking in the 19th century.
Wait, I'm going to play that back.
Monetary anchor period where the central bank monetary anchor.
The central bank monetary anchor. Remember that, because I'm going to come back to that. The central bank monetary anchor
was not there, and that precipitated crisis after crisis. That certainly was the case at the time of the free banking in the 19th century. Do we want to go back to those days? Probably not. I would say certainly not from our vantage point, as a result of which we have to respond to the demand for those digital payments in order to maintain the role of anchor that we have.
Just talking about this central anchor, right? Every country has a central bank. What is the central anchor? And here's where really the potential of XRP is totally unleashed, okay? I'm not going to read through this whole article, but I've read it many times. I've talked about it in many videos, and so I'm pretty much an expert on it. So this is from 2018. There was a conference with all these big bankers, the world power players, called Bretton Woods at 75. Now, Bretton Woods was what happened after World War II. It basically was the monetary conference where they determined that the world reserve currency would be the dollar, and that's how we were going to go forward, okay? Now, Bretton Woods happened 75 years ago, so they had this conference to celebrate the IMF, International Monetary Fund, and the World Bank turning 75 years old. Now, remember what I was saying in this video? Remember central bank anchor? The IMF, this is my opinion, I'm just a schizo on YouTube. I believe the IMF, the International Monetary Fund, will be this central bank anchor. And they explain basically how in this conference. In this panel discussion at Bretton Woods at 75, they have this thing called Rethinking International Cooperation, right? The US world reserve currency, the dollar, is doing terrible. It's going to zero. And they had this conference 5 years ago to kind of hypothesize, where do we go from here, right? The dollar's on its way out. We got to recover this. The focus of the panel was on how the US dollar is the world's reserve currency, and it's less than optimal for the global financial system. The second message that was given throughout the panel was that there is a need for a more equal power structure between countries, right? It's not really equal right now. The US kind of runs everything. The USD, the euro, and the Indian currency, which effectively would mean a reduction in the global role for USD. That's good, right? The US dollar is going to zero, so it's probably good for the global economy to reduce that. A multipolar relationship between the major currencies would be preferred. Okay. What sparked my interest was the mention of the Trifflin and the Keynes Plan. Okay. These are two monetary plans from the Bretton Woods Conference in the 50s that were not chosen. So they did not choose this one. But they're talking about things from these plans, and get these plans. We can imagine a new expanded role for the IMF by adapting and modernizing some old ideas of what's called the Keynes and Trifflin Plan. So just at the beginning, I was saying this IMF is going to be the central monetary anchor. Guys, they're saying it right here. We can imagine a new expanded, a new larger role for the IMF by taking some ideas from the Keynes and Trifflin Plan. So let's go into the Keynes and Trifflin Plan and see what these are about. So the Keynes Plan, an alternative set of proposals for international monetary institutions proposed by John Keynes at the Bretton Woods negotiations in 1944. The Keynes Plan, guys, get this, would have involved the creation of an international monetary unit called the Bancor. This is what I hypothesized to be XRP, International Bridge Currency. The plan was rejected by the IMF and was set up instead to use the US dollar because the US wanted power. Okay, so the Bancor, International Monetary Currency, like a world dollar, was part of the Keynes Plan. The following is a definition of the Bancor. Okay, and this is crazy stuff. The Bancor was a supranational currency. We have seen in official documents from central banks across the world talking about XRP being this. These power players have referred to time and time again that XRP is a supranational currency. I know the SEC is arguing it's a security, but central banks, reputable think tanks, I don't have the documents now. I can, if you want me, I'll get them. But I've seen countless documents, probably you have too, where they refer to XRP as a supranational currency. The Bancor was a supranational currency that John Keynes conceptualized in 1940, in which the United Kingdom proposed to introduce after World War II. The name was inspired by blah, blah, blah. This newly created supranational currency would then be used in an international trade as a unit of account within a multilateral clearing system, the International Clearing Union, which would also have to be founded. So here, in this plan from 1940, they're describing this is the central bank anchor, right? You need a multilateral clearing system and for the international trade, right? You can't just have international trade between a bunch of sovereign countries because there's more barriers. If you have a central global clearing union, it makes it more feasible and there's less friction to international trade. This is what I believe the IMF wants to be. They want to be the International Clearing Union. A supranational currency was part of the Keynes Plan. Now here is something additional that caught my attention. XRP was labeled as supranational currency in an official document discussing digital fiat currencies. And now, when I originally covered this, and I can show the old video, there used to be a picture here. The picture has now been scrubbed from the internet. but it showed in a document from the Hong Kong Central Bank or one of the Indonesian central banks describing XRP as a supranational currency. What it also displays is Bitcoin being labeled as a cryptocurrency. Specific labels are of importance, especially in official documents, right? Bitcoin is labeled a cryptocurrency. XRP is labeled a supranational currency. One has utility, one doesn't. So then that's the Keynes plan, but what is the Triffin plan? The Keynes-Triffin plan is a radical solution to create a new international organization, an international central bank, to which would be handed over the foreign exchange reserves of all countries. That is the Keynes-Triffin plan on international liquidity. What is XRP and Ripple so good at? On-demand liquidity. The major obstacle to its implementation would be the reluctance of countries to give up the sovereignty over their reserves, but it can be considered as a proposal to set the ball rolling for future negotiations. So essentially, you have an international central bank. Each country gives that international central bank some reserves, and then that international central bank oversees all the transactions between all of the world's central banks. This would indeed be a radical solution for the central banks to hand over the reserves to the IMF. Now, it is not certain that the IMF would envision the arrangement to this full extent, likely some altered version of it. From what was said later on in the conference, it is clear that the IMF envisioned themselves as holding a lot more power in the future as far as handling payments between the world's central banks. From the conference, the following was stated, and I quote, "You could imagine the IMF could centralize reserve sharing agreements by administering a global reserve facility at the IMF, perhaps by building on the existing drawing rights. The IMF could also multilateralize the decentralized parts and the largely discretionary network of bilateral swap lines, either by acting as a central counterparty for these bilateral swap lines and absorbing some of the counterparty risk, or by offering itself its own short-term swap facility." So this is actually a benefit, right? Bilateral swap lines. So if certain countries want to trade right now, like the U.S. Central Bank, the Federal Reserve, won't operate with some third world countries because there's too much risk. Now, this central global bank, this international global bank, could be acting as a counterparty risk, which would allow for some of these bilateral swap lines to be multilateralized, right? So like the USA maybe would operate and work with other central banks that have a lot more risk if there was a central counterparty unit, right? Because it takes some of the risk away. That is kind of the benefit. With this international central bank, you could see less friction and more trade. It is thus evident in how they envision the IMF as being a counterparty to central banks. An argument was made that the IMF could essentially lower the risk, like what I was just saying, between central banks, since if the IMF absorbed the risk instead of the central banks, they could lower the risk for the central banks as a whole. It was put forward the following way. The IMF could show up as an intermediary between the Federal Reserve. Since we're talking about the dollars and the other central banks, and why I say intermediary is because many countries, say India or Brazil, would enjoy benefiting from the swap lines, but do not right now because the Federal Reserve worries about risk, right? Countries that have more economic risk, like India and Brazil, they can't swap with the Federal Reserve because of this risk. Well, the IMF could appear in the middle. They could take on the sovereign risk and say with the dollar, and then give a swap line to the Indian rupee or the Brazilian real, okay? So that's the Keynes-Triffin plan. If you guys are still watching, subscribe. If you're new, hit the bell next to the subscribe button because YouTube shadow bans me. If you hit the bell next to the subscribe button, you'll never miss a beat. And join the Telegram chat. In the future, I'm going to charge money for this. It's free. If you like crypto, you like talking about it, link is in the video description below. And guys, this was a long video. If you're still watching, comment peanut butter below by watching the full video. You really support the channel. It makes the video do better. So let me know that you finished. I really do appreciate y'all that watched the full video. Comment peanut butter below. Hope you guys found this interesting. God bless you guys. Until next time.